So once again, hi everybody, and welcome to our today's webinar regarding 3C. So clarity control by capture. Are you still deploying clarity manually? So we have now almost Christmas, and we want to make you a small Christmas present this year. And that's why we thought it would be good to have a webinar session before the end of the year and release a new version of our tool. So we will go through, and this is the agenda for today. We will go through these topics. So we will talk about clarity and how clarity is continuously changing and what that actually means to you, to the customers, and also what in regards to development and deployment pace we see currently as one of the main limiting factors probably as well. Challenges, we will discuss some challenges we see with our clients in regards to clarity development and deployment. And of course, we will do a live demo at the end. Once again, please use the Q&A box to ask all the questions throughout the session. We'll be more than happy to answer those during the webinar. And this time I'm not alone. I'm very glad to have Tamas Sika with me today. He is our senior solution architect, and he's one of the masterminds actually behind 3C. So if he can answer the question, probably nobody can. And I'm very happy that he's supporting me today.
Manuel, I think one of the questions is that the screen is frozen. I'm not sure. Do you have your presentation in pause mode, or do you have do you share? Can you check it, please?
I share the screen. It should be working now. Maybe you can check it as well, but everybody should see now the agenda slide. I'm also just reconfirming that. Yeah. So you should be able to see the agenda slide, and I will now also kick the session off. My name is Manuel Brugger. I will have the pleasure today to guide you through this webinar. And as promised, I will now turn off my camera and directly dive into the session. Once again, the reminder, session is recorded. So if you miss anything, please let us know. Otherwise, we are happy to receive all your questions through the session.
Yep. So, and I will try to take care of the answers during the session. So just bomb me all the questions you have in the meantime.
Perfect. Thanks, Tamas, and thanks for having me here today. So we already discussed this, maybe depending on who has participated from you the last time. So clarity is changing. And of course, we encourage customers and we want that clarity is continuously and constantly change. But in some occasions, these changes can be quite overwhelming. And as there are so many different possibilities how you are able to change clarity, it can be right tough to keep track of all the different changes that have been done and to make sure that all those are deployed correctly and regularly. But of course, your clarity development needs to also somehow keep the pace of a modern IT organization. And I mean, let's face the truth, in most of the cases, we feel sometimes when we do development, whether it is as like we are as a partner or also on the customer side, like we need to play on a huge track, but only have a very small vehicle. But what we actually would need is some sort of Formula One racing car to really keep the pace of what we see as a modern IT organization with let's say, a balanced automation with a quite high pace in terms of releases, because that's actually what most of the customers are nowadays expecting. So that you have a regular release cadence, that you bring up new, fresh functionality, and all that goes hand in hand and ideally completely smooth and flawless. And that's basically where we see that there is some sort of friction between the way and the possibilities that clarity by default offers us, and on the other hand, the expectations that customers have nowadays in a modern organization and environment. But what happens actually when you do not regularly update, change, and enhance your Clarity installation? So what we see very often is that, of course, first and foremost, is that the user satisfaction is dropping because, I mean, let's face it, DOI of the classic Clarity overview can look a little bit old-fashioned. Yeah, the new user interface is much more beautiful. The second thing, of course, is this are misaligned to current and up-to-date processes and strategies. Also, this can mean a lot of friction to the users if they do not see that actually how they are forced or should use the system does not really go hand in hand with what they actually should do in terms of processes and how they actually should manage their projects, which will then, of course, lead to using two different systems. Slow integration of new hires, because it's even more difficult for somebody who doesn't have the history of the organization to get to know a complete new system for them. And at the end of the day, you will have a very high effort to keep the data up to date. Because if the people and the users are not really using a solution voluntarily, and if it's not aligned to the processes, you will have a really hard time to get a good database for your, for example, yearly planning or your resource planning or whatsoever you're using with Clarity. So it's really important to keep your Clarity solution up to date. But keeping that in mind, there are still some issues and difficulties that we see when we talk about how Clarity is able to be developed and can be deployed. And I'm just picking a few of them to not, I mean, we all can read probably very well. So, but I will concentrate on a few, let's say, use cases. Yeah? The first and foremost thing is that, let's face it, we all already did a fix in test or in prod because it was too lengthy to do the fix in development, push it over to test and push it over to prod. So we will very likely have the situation that there are differences even with a freshly and frozen development test and prod cycle. There will be differences between those systems if you really go into one-on-one comparison. And you need to find out what these differences are, because every ongoing development could have an impact on that. That's the first thing. Another thing that, I mean, we are all not really fond of doing documentation, right? Especially if it comes to system documentation of a system that should constantly change. So keeping track and keeping these things updated is quite a task and quite a boring one, to be honest. Another thing that we still see with Clarity is manual deployments. So when we look at how Clarity is actually designed to be deployed, of course, you have the possibility to XOG and script some of these configurations from one system to the other. But let's face the truth, in many occasions and within many environments, the deployments of customer and all these changes are done manually. So you do basically the changes that you did in the one system in the other one as well, which of course leaves quite some potential for human error, which is natural. Not mentioning things like the deployment validation. So if you do manual deployment, but even if you do an automatic deployment, who can guarantee you that whatever you want to deploy from dev to test to prod is actually reaching the prod environment? There is no real mechanism to verify whether or not everything has been deployed successfully. I mean, you can go through the logs, yes, but who does that, to be honest? So there are several challenges that we see, and there are a few things that we see important to overcome those challenges. The one thing, of course, is to get to a certain degree of automation. This, and one of the major reasons for that is basically that we get rid of the manual work and there's this huge source of error. I mean, let's face it, like this lamp that you see probably in every car, who exactly knows where to look at and what it means when this is blinking up? So you might have an error in test or production and you have no clue where it actually comes from. And if you do a manual deployment, it will be really hard to track those issues down. By starting to get a decent level of automation within your deployment process, it could help you to at least find some of those errors earlier and faster. Another thing is to really track the changes that you do from one system to the other. And by that, we mean that you really need to know what was changed and when was it changed and where. And of course, finally, you need to make sure to verify what actually was deployed, because only if you really ensure, and I like the picture here, that you can trust the solution and you can trust the people that are doing the deployment. But in this case, it's very good to just verify whether or not really everything has happened as defined and as promised. And with these 3 pillars, you can lay really a cornerstone to making your Clarity development and also the deployment not only faster, but also more professional and more, let's say, up to date in terms of keeping the pace with a modern IT infrastructure. And of course, we would like to support this. And that's the reason why we have basically the session today to really welcome Clarity Control 2.0, so 3C 2.0, because with this release, we are not only concentrating, as in release 1, on the possibility to track the changes and to get an overview over your current deployment, but also being able to push your development from one system to the other. And I'm not talking any longer. I will directly dive into the demo. So before we start and go through the newest feature, the deployments, I will, for those of you who haven't seen 3C at all, I will just briefly give you an overview what you actually see and what 3C is actually about. So when we talk about 3C, what we mean is that we have the possibility to track your developments, so everything that you did in terms of configuration of Clarity, track those and make snapshots out of those different developments. You see here, we can maintain different environments, meaning that we can connect with 3C to the different stages of your Clarity development environment. Like we have here the 0.3 environment, 0.4 and 0.5. In your term, that could mean development, task, production, Q&A, pre-prod, whatsoever. You get it. And what we do, as soon as we connect to those, we can make snapshots. And snapshot is basically that we get all metadata regarding your Clarity development out of your system. So we are not snapshotting and making a complete database snapshot of your whole Clarity installation. We only focus on those elements that are of interest for us, and those are configuration information. So basically, we make snapshots to make sure that you have a backup of your Clarity development ready and at your disposal. And you can do that on a daily, weekly, monthly, whatsoever basis. Or like I did in my example here, you can make snapshots at the start of a sprint and at the end of a sprint. And that actually leads me to the next item that I would like to talk about. And just to give you an info before I go to that maybe. And when we talk about snapshots, is basically, as I mentioned before, that we do a snapshot of all the different configuration items. We're not really snapshotting your data, meaning like demands, ideas, projects, whatsoever. We're only focusing on configuration relevant information, which on the one hand also gives you a quite huge advantage actually when it also comes to, for example, disaster recovery. So when something goes south with your deployment or with your configuration and you need to roll back, you can use 3C to easily roll back your configuration to a stage independently from the data and the database. So you do not have to restore the database of all the project data and lose that information. You can only concentrate with 3C on the configuration information. And there you see, for example, an overview over all the different elements. The second and maybe even more important topic is what we can do as soon as we have those snapshots. So imagine at first we do, for example, a snapshot of the sprint begin and end. And what we can do now is to make a difference analysis of the sprint changes that have been done throughout the sprint. So you see here, for example, that I made a snapshot before and after. I see most of the elements are the same, but I have a few configuration elements. One is a new object. No, sorry, it's a change in the portfolio object. And within the portfolio object, I have a new element. In this case, if I open it, I can have a look at it and see, okay, it's in the object, it's a new attribute. So I see immediately that I have added a new attribute to my Clarity portfolio object. So this is a very easy way of tracking all that information to make sure that I do not miss any changes. You can, of course, also use that differential analysis to, for example, track the differences before and after an upgrade, or that you track the differences between the development, the test, and the production system, or before and after you release something. There are multiple ways how you start using those difference trackings, because this is one of the core features. And if we go into the difference list and go back to that, you will also see that I can do an infinite number of difference analysis. And you also see it's immediately visible that from this snapshot and this difference analysis I did, there were 2 deleted items, 175 modified, and 594 were added. If I dig into this a little bit, you will get an overview, and I then can immediately see what has been changed, go into one element in more detail, for example, the group, and then see within the group what has been changed in detail. And what you can also see is, and this is the third functionality I would like to spend a few minutes on, and that's actually what we have added with the 2.0 release, is now the deployment functionality. I will come to the more details a little bit later. What I just want you to see here is that I have now my differential analysis. I can either create a new deployment, or I can say, okay, let me see what do I want to have as part of my 15.9 post-upgrade deployment. So I have my differential analysis, and then I can define, okay, before and after, what do I want to deploy? What are the differences between the 2 stages? Imagine, for example, sprint begin, sprint end. Which of these changes do I actually want to deploy? And then I can say, okay, I want to add, for example, the changes that have been made to the role new UX PML, and I want to also add the item, the role modern UX DL, the deletion of this, and I want to add this to my upgrade deployment. What I can do is really select step by step whatever I want to really be part of my deployment. And that's actually what where finally all the things come together. When we now look at the deployment, I have here an overview over all different deployments that I can create. I can basically also here create theoretically infinite number. What we do within a deployment, we of course define what is my target environment and where are actually the sources and the target information I want to look at, and then I can prepare my package. So as you've seen before, I have had a differential analysis for the sprint begin and sprint end. I just can get an overview over the changes that have been done and see that I have an object in the portfolio object, and can, of course, once again, show this one and have a more defined and detailed overview. But what I want to do and to show you for the time being is I want to immediately push this forward. Yeah. So as soon as I am picking up the resume here, you will see that 3C is actually starting the deployment. And just to give you an overview, I have now here the attributes of the portfolio object open. And you see here there is no custom object at the moment. And as soon as the process has been successfully applied, and this is basically done in the background, I do not interfere anymore here. It's automatically deploying the solution, and I get a status information. It can, of course, also show the detail with some description, some note, and of course, the detailed XML information. And as soon as I go over and refresh my screen, you will see that the new attribute has been added magically to the Clarity database. So this is basically where the beauty of 3C comes from, where we really have now the possibility to really see to really see the changes that have been made, and I can directly deploy it to my Clarity instance. Of course, this for our demo was only one specific item and one specific object. What I can look at is it can be way more complex, and I have added before here to this deployment package some additional items. So you see here that I have changed and deleted or added some roles for that. So you basically, and this is where 3C, where the beauty of 3C comes from, is that we do not only deploy now with the 2.0 release, we also have the possibility to bring in some logic. So for example, if I want to now deploy the application menu first, what I can do is, and what I can show you is, if I let 3C order the system once again, it will automatically reorder it to a specific place. Why? Because we know, and this is how 3C is actually designed, we know that you have to follow a specific order to get everything deployed successfully. Otherwise, you probably will screw up your whole deployment if you are not doing the deployment in a specific order and make sure that everything has been done properly. What you can also do is, and you see here what you did, what actually is done. So there are some modification, there is some creation, and there are some so-called custom actions, meaning that I can, for example, add manual steps. So I can really do some sort of manual pushing, and also some items and some steps are added automatically to make sure that, for example, a process is checked before we do the deployment or after we did the deployment. So there are some things that 3C, of course, can do, and therefore we also added for some manual steps as well. I can set breakpoints, meaning that I have the possibility to say, within my deployment, I want to make sure that at that point, the deployment is halted for a second. I'll check something and I have to manually resume. Otherwise, it will run through to every manual step. This is something I have to go through. And what you can also see is that there are so-called repeated steps, meaning that 3C automatically regenerates specific steps where, out of our experience, we need to make sure that the deployment is done at least a second time to make sure that all the different cross connections and dependencies are maintained properly. So you see, 3C and the deployment functionality with the release 2.0 is more than a simple click box where you just add and, let's say, XOG out some of your deployment. It's really bringing the possibility to, together with the differential analysis, to really make sure that everything that is relevant to your environment is being able to deploy it and can then be pushed into test or production without the need to script and pull everything together. So basically what we now have is a full-fledged solution where you snapshot what you have. Very typical examples, begin and end of the sprint. you track what were the differences, and so you select those differences that you actually want to release and push only those to your test and to your production environment. So that was a very, very short overview over the highlights of 3C. If you want to see more, of course, we would be more than happy if we spend a little bit of time together to look at it. We would also be more than happy to to look at these things in your environment, meaning that we could test drive it in your environment. And I'm pretty sure that we will find some interesting results when we install 3C or let actually 3C work with your environment as well and have a look at, for example, the difference tracking or the snapshots. So I would like to stop my part of the presentation now and let Tamas do a little bit of his magic in answering some of the questions, and we'll wrap the session up.
All right, so I don't have many unanswered questions actually in the chat. So what I would like to bring up is we have a quite often asked question to me from actually one of our clients and also from our colleagues as well. Is especially we started to use 3C quite often for patches and upgrades, and often comes the questions from our clients that, okay, but what is in for me when I do upgrades, or how can I mitigate the pain for upgrades because they decided to do every half a year an upgrade, or if they want to increase the pace or the frequency of doing upgrades. And actually, what we noticed after using 3C for upgrades is it's really simple to use. I just created snapshots before and after an upgrade of the same system, for example. And if I do this diff analysis, you will see very, very clearly that there are some objects that are overwritten. Usually the PMO accelerator that overwrites your configuration quite often. And you see every single item that has been overwritten. You can cherry pick that which has out of these changes meaning to you. For example, you changed the formula or calculation, or you renamed, you translated some of the labels, and these are usually overwritten. And you see it immediately very clearly. And to redeploy these changes, or basically to redeploy your older configuration back as it was basically just picking up, as Manuel showed you, just picking up those relevant changes that you would like to replace backwards, and then click the run button, and actually it was replacing back, which would eventually taking you very, very more time just to get an idea where the change is, what should I eventually test after upgrade. So this is one of the very good use case that comes up really regularly and basically as a main pain from one of our clients or some of our clients. Oh yeah, and there is one more question dropped in. What are the planned next features planned on your roadmap? The question came to our chat. So basically, yes, we do maintain a roadmap. And actually, this roadmap is quite often open for changes as well. So we are focusing now to move 3C in the actually enhancing the diff and the snapshotting functionalities to also capture customizations that are not necessarily supported by CA and Broadcom. So this is one of the main direction, but there are also many features under research, and this is quite open for discussion. So I think if you contact us, we can discuss if you have a specific need, if it's on our roadmap, and how or when could 3C deliver you your desired functionalities. What is also in our roadmap is actually some kind of configuration possibilities. So if you have a very specific need, that we should be able to cover it as well.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to mention as well. Thanks, Tamas, for answering those questions so far. Basically, if you want to get a little bit deeper and closer look into a functional perspective, I mean, we only wanted to give you a very high level overview. I'm pretty sure that there are tons of use cases that we would cover and be able to demo with you in a more detailed session. So feel free to reach out to us. You have here the one generic email address, but most of you already know somebody within our organization. So just feel free to reach out to us at any time. For today, I would like to say thanks for watching the session, for listening to us, and yeah, basically we hope, or yeah, I hope and we hope that it was of interest for you. And yeah, for today, once again, thanks for watching. Have a nice, let's say, rest of the pre-Christmas season, and yeah, stay safe and healthy, and see you hopefully again soon. Bye bye.
Thank you very much.